Ms. Colbert, now I've got the microphone. Okay? So my response to Ms. Colbert was, I understand if everyone wants to submit a letter. And what I did, just so I could understand, by way of mailboxes in town, as far as people who are in support and people who are opposed. That's all I told her. I'm not saying that, well, because I got 857 letters from one side and I got 697 from the other side, well, that makes the game. What I explained was why I separated the letters the way I did. And that was all I did. It was for my own personal preference to be able to read through them. I didn't put any more or less weight into it. I respect every letter that comes into the village. It is a public record. Everyone is welcome to see these letters, make copies of all 1,500 now that we probably have. All I'm telling you is that I have a right to try to organize the letters so that I could read them, just like everyone else can organize them, just like the rest of the trustees. Thank you. Next on the list is going to be Mr. Liebelson, Jerry Liebelson. Name and address for the record, Mr. Liebelson, please.
These are designed so that both the board and the employees.
Thank you, that was very considerate. Okay, name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Jerry Liebelson, 31 Midway Road. My remarks are going to focus, they're going to be a different tenor than what you've heard. I am focusing on one especially consequential impact of the proposed law. This is a bit sort of technical, but I feel it's important that you as a board understand the reality here, because you may not see it on your street, but we're seeing it on our street. We don't need assurances given by the ultra-religious community or need to listen to anecdotal examples about the so-called Wesley Hills model. We already have at least 4 real-world examples in this village of what's to come under this proposed law, thanks to the village's poor and selective code enforcement and improper building permit approvals. Ththese examples are illustrated on the panels before you, right? Omitted the house number and just give the name of the street. Each image is marked with the date, the time, the day of the week, and the number of cars involved. Each of these 4 properties is a home that is in use as a full or a partial place of worship. One of them is operating, as Mr. Corbin said, illegally for nearly a year, having been renovated without a building permit, issued a violation, and still has no certificate of occupancy. 2 of them are 100% exempt from property and school tax, and no doubt the other 2 will follow in time. All but one are owned by named religious congregations on the 2018 tax roll. The photos record just a fraction of the parking that occurs year-round, and 3 of the panels don't show the worst of what's taking place there. I leave that to neighbors living near these places. They can give ample testimony about that. I present these examples to highlight the following key factual points that the board and residents need to keep in mind about what we are actually dealing with here. 1, these places are intended not just on the Sabbath and holy days, but every day and night of the week. And the regular weeknight attendance at most of these places is from 9 o'clock on. The parking extends well beyond the property boundary, usually across more than 2 homes, and on multiple blocks when there are special functions being held. There is persistent illegal parking by congregants, sometimes dangerously illegal, especially at the bottom of Spring Hill Terrace, where clearly posted street signs are routinely ignored. All those situations are marked in the images with red X's or circles. Some people coming to these places do not live in the immediate neighborhood, which probably explains the constant illegal parking. After all, the congregation would probably tell their congregants to observe the parking signs, but apparently not, because these are all different people sometimes. The bottom line is this. The idea of places of worship inside our neighborhoods was intended to allow worshipers to be in walking distance. Cars, therefore, should be restricted and only be used for special purposes like very bad weather, ill health, etc. Allowing off-site parking of any kind expands the activity footprint of the place of worship beyond the property boundary, which is unfair to other residents. It allows for and encourages attendance by people not living in the immediate local neighborhood, and it encourages local residents to park there simply for convenience when they can just walk. This is why then in section 2 of the 6-page letter that you received about over 620 and it's signed. Anybody else would like to sign one? This is different from the coupon letter, but you can sign both of them. All parking at all gathering places and places of worship must be on site. A congregation must work within the allotted number of on-site parking spaces and make whatever accommodation among themselves to comply with that, like carpooling, a van service, whatever. And if this means that most of the property's back and side yard is turned into a parking lot, then so be it. It's better than having it spread out all over the goddamn neighborhood. You must then also require that to be completely screened off from view by the rest of the neighborhood. All right? I think this is pretty clear. This is actually happening now. These photographs are real.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Myrna Fauser? Falcon, sorry about that. Name and address for the record, please.
Myrna Falcon, 45 Wilshire Drive. Mr. Mayor, you were quoted as saying in today's Journal News regarding the letters that were received at Village Hall for and opposing the changes that you want to implement, that the letters from the opposition were from multiple family members. Sir, if my household consists of 4 members, all over the age of 18 of age, when we vote individually. Each vote is counted individually, not as one vote per household. Therefore, why shouldn't all members of my household have the right to be counted individually if they oppose changes to the zoning that you want to implement? This change affects everyone that resides in Chestnut Ridge and nearby communities. You stated in the Journal News that nearly an equal amount of letters supporting the zoning has been received. No mention as to whether those letters were from multiple family members. You stated opposition letters were also from people that live in other Ramapo communities and other towns. Well, how do you know that all the letters from those supporting the change reside in Chestnut Ridge? I am opposed to all parking for the houses of worship to be off-site and within 1,500 feet. The purpose for the zoning change supposedly was to allow residential houses of worship so that this particular religious group would be able to walk to their place of worship since they are not allowed to drive on their holy days. Their off-site parking should not be allowed if you have 2 or 3 of these houses of worship in the same residential block. How many cars are going to be on that block? If non-religious residents are having a family over for holidays, birthdays, anniversary, or just a gathering, family gathering, is it fair for my family to have to drive over 15 feet to park and walk to my home? I think not. Where is the compromise? This so-called tweaking is only one-sided. Now it was changed, the name was changed to residential gathering places. So this means that the possibility of our residential area will be congested with cars in the streets maybe 7 days a week. Special functions should not be allowed within our neighborhoods. Special functions may disrupt the quality of life of other residents because you're encouraging persons from outside of Chestnut Ridge that may be bussed in to attend these special functions. Therefore, these buses will be parked on our streets. Traffic and noise to follow. Regarding inspections, they should be done yearly and unscheduled. Again, I am in favor for a comprehensive plan. There has to be testimony that it does not take, there has been testimony that it does not take 3 to 4 years, as you, Mr. Mayor, have stated during a prior meeting. It takes 18 to 24 months. The new draft falls short. It needs more tweaking in maintaining our suburban way of life and not tweaking to urbanize our village. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Grayson, Lee Grayson. Name and address for the record, Mr. Grayson, please.
Lee March Grayson, 52 Wilshire Drive, Chestnut Ridge. I support a building moratorium. I think we need time to think about what we are doing in this village. When we moved here 9.5 years ago, we came because of open spaces, diversity, a nice, quiet neighborhood. And boy, have things changed. I'm angry. I'm very angry at what you are doing on this board. You are supposed to represent all of us, not some of us. Now, I see you as destroying this village, and the reason that myself and my wife and many others, the reason that we moved here, you're worried about the RUPA laws. And I would suggest to you that you should be a little bit concerned about the establishment costs. Quite frankly, walking a few blocks to synagogue is not a substantial burden under the RUPA laws. The proposed modifications to this zoning ordinance, quite frankly, are unenforceable and unintelligible. To be blunt, the village can't enforce the laws that you have now. Now, in reading over, for example, residential gathering places, I look around the community and I notice multiple families in what's supposed to be single-family homes, overcrowded single-family homes, cluster parking on streets and lawns that make it difficult for cars to drive through, noise pollution, ridiculous light pollution at night. You should drive down Wilshire Drive, for example. It is disturbing, okay? Illegal construction after 5 p.m. during the week and on weekends, and the code enforcement is either unable or incapable or quite frankly incompetent to do a job of enforcement. county of Rockland in which more than half of the residents have full property tax exemption. And if you have, as pointed out by one of the attorneys for Coupon, more than 90% of residents qualify as a residential gathering place, well, guess what? There will be hundreds and hundreds of applications for partial and full tax exemptions. We cannot afford this. Our property taxes are going to soar. And I think everyone, including people in the religious community, ought to be very concerned about this problem. I mean, I understand that there's a proposal to now make Red Schoolhouse Lane a commercial zone. Okay? Well, guess what, folks? We're not getting Amazon. And as I'm sure you know, in order to build things, you need to build infrastructure. And that typically costs far more than the tax revenue that could be possibly generated. So what are you going to do? I understand there's a proposal to sell vacant land, like the 8.3 acres on Pinebrook Street in the village. Well, what happens when you run out of land? What these modifications do, you're asking us to shoulder a tax bill for people who will not be paying their property taxes. And we simply can't do this. This proposal is a rush to judgment. It's an absolute rush to judgment. We need a building moratorium, and we need a comprehensive plan with input from all of the citizens in Chestnut Ridge. And what is baffling to me, and I think a lot of people, is why aren't you doing this? This is, after all, your job. Isn't that the reason why you were elected? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grayson. Mr. Meady? She signed up, did she not? Oh, she. Come on.
Margaret Dupuy, 49 Spring Hill Terrace.
Good
A lot of stuff I'm going to say has been said before. But in your speaking to Ms. Colbert about the reason that you separated the letters, or no, there was a man who was speaking before and people were cheering him on. And you said, you know this is a constitutional right. Well, as a lawyer, I know you know the constitutional right. So why are you taking hours away by the way you are lumping those letters and counting letters from one address as one vote? Okay? You do not have the right, sir, to take away our opinion or our votes or our choices. Okay? So each one of those letters should count as one. If it's 10 in the family, then it is 10 letters. It should be counted as such. Okay? Another thing I would like to say is that I know that on this board, there are people who already told us that this village is compliant with OLUPA. Okay? So then why are you telling us that we're not? Why are you jumping or rushing through this? Okay? You know the consequences. Why are you not just doing what is fair for everyone else? I just don't get it. I always thought that the person in charge of a village or in charge in a governmental position should be able to censor, or to be, I really should say, should be able to let everybody else's opinion count. This is not so in this place, and it is so sad, and it is so shameful. Okay? It's a shame that we are going to be treated this way. With the law enforcement or the code enforcement, we, as people said, and I've said to you before, we cannot even enforce the codes that we have now. But I know that many times before, Mr. Mayor, that you had said, since the code enforcers were on part-time, that if you needed to, you would change the work schedule to accommodate so that they could check what is going on after 4 o'clock. I know you've said it before, but now you're telling us the office closes at 4, therefore we don't know, call the police. Well, guess what? On Sunday, from where I am, there was such a noise from trees they were already cut, they were being shredded. Now, I'm on Spring Hill Terrace. This was happening on Pamela. The noise that was going on, okay? But there was no one around to help. And talk about light pollution on my street. I now had to wear a sleep mask to be able to sleep because of the light pollution. Okay? Now, is that a fair thing to do? I left the city for all that. So why now am I being subjected to all this? Why are you not stepping up for us? Why are you not stepping up for us? You know, if you had treated us correctly, you would have gotten a lot more of us from Chestnut Ridge. But it's not going to happen. I, for one, will never vote for you again.
Thank you. All right, I don't think there's anyone else, I don't have any folks else from the village that have signed up, so now we'll start going outside the village. Looks like I have Chris Carey. And Mr. Carey, name and address for the record, please.
My name is Christopher Carey. I live at 142 Pineview Avenue in Gardonia. I am finishing up my 7th year as a Rockland County legislator representing Gardonia, Nanuet, a portion of Ramapo, and also West Nine. I bring part of my background before I joined the legislature. I was on the Architecture and Landscape Committee for 3 years and 3 years at the Planning Board in Clarkstown. I bring that up because while I was in those positions, I took part in the comprehensive plan for Clarkstown that was completed in 2009. This was an award-winning comprehensive plan recognized by the Pace Land Use Institute. And when I attended the last meeting, I believe it was the second meeting at the high school, there was a statement made that it takes 4 years to do a comprehensive plan. That didn't sit right with me that night, and I called Joe Simos, the town planner, the next day, and he confirmed that it was 18 months from start to finish. I would submit that the comprehensive plan that you would need to put together is nowhere near as complex as one that Clarkstown would have had to done. And I think you can do it in a much shorter time frame than 18 months. That's why I don't think that 4-year time frame is realistic, and I'd really ask you guys to go back and sharpen your pencils on that. It's just not reality. Don't take my word for it. Call Joe Simos, town planner in Clarkstown. Second point is, I can appreciate the pressure that this board is under. I've been there sitting in the legislature as well. But that pressure shouldn't lead you to bypass your land use boards. Those land use boards are there to do exactly the opposite. They're there to help you make these important decisions. They're a combination of citizens and experts that come back and present to you the word comprehensive. It's not something that is just looking at, you're afraid of being sued, okay? This is the kind of work that you put together protects you from doing that. You just need to be consistent. And it also takes the politics out of this. The reason why I bring that up is that you gentlemen do not operate in a vacuum. The decisions or lack of decisions that you make here in Chestnut Ridge ripple throughout the county. And the fact that it's not just the decisions you come up with, it's how you approach them. I can see that now that people putting pressure on other boards and other municipalities to say, let's do what we did in Chestnut Ridge, and suddenly they're going to go rush to judgment and try to make the pain go away. I implore you not to do that. I implore you to go back to the drawing board, start over in that tried and true process. Look, you're members of the Rockland County Municipal Planning Federation, which I was a trustee for 5 years. The process is well documented. You're members of that association. It's not anything new. You have people to do this. I implore on you to go back, to do the right job, and come back and make sure that whatever you document has taken in all of the different input from various parts of the community, open space, recreation. That's why it's called a comprehensive plan. And again, I can't stress enough, decisions you make don't end at the boundary lines, be it the village, be it the town. You impact everybody in Rockland County. And I hope when you make that decision, you remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Carey. As an elected official, and you're aware of the process that's involved, and you're aware that things don't happen overnight, and you're aware that before you could assess a situation, as you've just done for Chestnut Ridge, you would have to look at the history for the past 2 or 3 years. So I appreciate your suggestions as far as what the village should do. I spoke with my planner again, and my planner tells me to do the whole village, he probably could do it in 2 years. Not 18 months, not less than 18 months, 2 years. That's the planner right there, okay? So, we know that we can do it in 2 years. And I respect again, Mr. Carey. So again, I thank you, Mr. Carey, for your input, but I would also ask that then perhaps look at the history of what's gone on in the village before you start really telling us how we could be handling this, because it's not as simple and it's not as easy as you're leading things on today. But again, thank you. Next is Mr. Dent. Rudy Dent? Mr. Dent. Mr. Dent, Rudy Dent, okay? Again, Mr. Dent, just name and address for the record.
Rudy Dent, 8 Red Oak Lane. Been here 22 years. First I want to say, I'm so proud of the people who have actually spoken out. I'm really proud to stand with you guys. Great progress. This is good. I love it. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I served 2.5 years in Vietnam. I have 2 medals for heroism, about 23 medals for valor. I served 4 teams as a police officer in Harlem, high crime area, and I served, retired with 32 years after 9/11 from the New York City Fire Department. I had a lot of training also as a fire marshal, and as a fire marshal, I'm recognized as an expert witness in court who can give an opinion in the field of arson. And I also had the power to administer the oath, take testimony, and issue a subpoena, which is more than a detective, okay? So I was trained in objective thinking. Now, when I see the repeated patterns, I'd like to say the first time I heard you speak, I was shocked. I was really shocked. And I think you should know that people are referring to you as the new St. Lawrence. I want to address issues that, Chris, by the way, I hope that everybody knows.
Mr. Dent, please stay to the House of Worship law. I appreciate you very much.
Okay. I just want to remind you, Chris got hit for another 300,000, nice. Okay. In regards to Arlupa, all right, our problems here are even much bigger, all right? They go up to the national government. And when I see things that are difficult to overcome, I look back to the founding fathers, and I can tell you that they would have kicked over the poker table and been shooting by now. All right? There's much talk about Arlupa. I witnessed 3 people threaten this board with the implementation of Arlupa. Arlupa is a disgraceful law that was put into place on an experimental basis to be reviewed after 10 years. Well, lo and behold, 10 years have passed, and the writers of that
disgraceful document no longer around. They're not to be found. Arlupa has to go. Arlupa has been turned into a disgraceful, racist, weaponized tool that's being used against the decency of every community that tries to defend itself. We talk about laws. Slaves discuss whether something is legal or not. Free men discuss whether it's right or wrong. Clearly, Arlupa is wrong. Clearly, what is happening in this town is wrong. Now, not just to beat up on you because you're supposed to be a leader and a representative, and clearly, you're not hitting that mark. You're not representing the interests of the people. You don't have their backing. And that should tell you something. But not only did you not recognize that, you ran for a higher position. What's going on up here?
House of worship law, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Jesus Christ, there's so much to say. Anyway, we have to look in the mirror. We have to look amongst ourselves. Jerry, great job. Look to Jerry for his organizational skills, because I came here after I read his organized, your newsletter. Let's get together. The real culprit is looking at us in the mirror. We have to get together, stand up, united, fight. We can do it. The founding fathers did it, and we can do it. And if you listen to the people who spoke here tonight, you know it's here. It's here. That spirit is alive and well. Let's protect it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carrietti, Michael Carrietti. Again, Mr. Carrietti, name and address for the record, please.
Michael Parietti, 6 Foodcart Road, Suffolk, New York. I realize that these things can be very contentious, and I understand the board's under a lot of pressure, but I think that we may be going down a slippery slope here. Because I think if you look at all the documentation and all the information that's available in regards to this law, it's clear that the origin of this ordinance, or the driving force behind it, came from one particular religious group. And the input came from the Orthodox Jewish Union. And it seems that the law is being tailored or tailor-made for one specific religious group. And I think it's pretty obvious, because I think you guys have recognized that, which really isn't something that should be. And that's why I think you have changed the name of it here at the last minute into the residential gathering, such as sort of a fig leaf to cover up the fact that it's really a law that's being driven and catering to one particular religious group. And I think, the fact that you change it to this very general category where it can be residential gathering place, I think the unintended consequences of that are very significant. Because it may not happen right away, but people will find a way to game the system. Houses will be sold, people will buy them realizing they can use these houses for all sorts of different things that are going to degrade the quality of life for everybody in the village. And just use your imagination. You can bring in 49 people and do whatever you want. It's going to hurt the quality of life for everybody, including the Orthodox as well as everybody else. So I think you need to think about the unintended consequences of what you're about to do. I also think that people talked about the Establishment Clause, and I think you need to look at that, because there's what's called a lemon test, like what they use in the Supreme Court to look at one of these laws, and there's 3 parts to it, all right? And it has to, if it fails any of them, it fails. It says it must have a secular legislative purpose. I can't see the secular legislative purpose in this law. It's clear this law is being designed to promote a religion. I don't see what's the secular legislative purpose to this law? It doesn't exist. It also must not have the primary cause or the primary effect of advancing a religion. And I think it's clear that that's exactly what this is doing. You're trying to cater to the needs of one religious group to help promote their religion. So it fails that as well. And the third thing is it cannot have the government can have an excessive entanglement with religious affairs. And this is completely entangled in the religious affairs because they're the driving force. They came to you and said, this is what we need. This is what we want from our religious community. And you're giving it to them. So I think it fails all three elements of the Lemon Test, which would mean that it's going to fail the Establishment Clause, which is something that could be, people could file a lawsuit on that grounds and it could be overturned. That's something to consider. A few other things. This law accelerates the demographic acceleration, all right? And we know that there's going to be demographic shift, but there should be ordinances pushed in to help accelerate it. I mean, that's unfair to the other residents. It's also a very contentious process, as you know. You know this is not a normal town, a normal village that's changing its zoning. That being the case, I think you really need to go through the comprehensive plan process, no matter how long it takes. Because then people get really angry and things get more contentious because they feel like they're being left out of the process. So I think here more than anywhere else, you should go through a comprehensive plan. And it does seem a little strange. I thought that this was supposed to be to help people who need to walk to their services, enable them to do that in the neighborhood. Then all of a sudden you have all this off-site parking. It seems a little strange. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's another bizarre thing I think you need to think about too. I should say that, forget about the number of letters people submitted. I do think if you look at the votes we got in the village in the last election, that I think is the important number. I think you lost in your own village, which tells you that I think more people are against this than in favor of it. I should say I'm with Preserve Ramapo. And in the last election, we endorsed you in your ticket. And we had some people come to us and ask us, that they wanted to run somebody against you guys. And we started dissuading them and said, we think he's going to try to do the right thing for both communities. But I don't think you're doing that now.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. I see Ms. Martin signed in a little late. Sabrina Martin, I saw you had signed in the window. Again, Ms. Martin, just name and address for the record, please.
Sabrina Martin, 2 Harvard Road. I don't have any prepared comments. I really came to listen, but after listening to some of the comments being made, I just felt the need to come up and say a few things. First of all, I have a concern about the integrity of leadership. I expect the leaders of our community to walk objectively and to remain unbiased. After hearing comments about the Journal News article, which I didn't read, but my immediate reaction to the way people quoted was stated in the Journal News article about the mayor stating how many opposed, how many for, and modifying comments with respect to how they should be counted. That my immediate reaction to that was, this is a biased statement. Why would a mayor, why would the leader of our town, who's supposed to remain objective, make any comments about how many are opposed to how many are against? We're still in the process of reviewing this. So there really shouldn't be any opinion at all about how many is for and how many is against. Particularly if the comments make it appear as if those who are for it are more or have more impact than those who are against it. Because the comments that you made about those who are against it, you discredited those particular groups of people who are speaking against the law. So my concern again is about integrity and remaining unbiased. And it gives us the impression that you are not in support of us. Why schedule a meeting 2 days before a major holiday, and the next month, 5 days before a major holiday? Okay. Major concern. Is there a need for us to meet every month? Particularly when you made revisions that really didn't take a whole lot into consideration with regards to the major concerns that were identified. You have the planning board, our planning board, who made comments on May 29th. And if I could just take a few minutes, not even a few minutes, hopefully just a few seconds. The planning board reviewed the proposed local law. While the planning board recognizes that the village feels that there's a need to change the zoning codes, we feel that these provisions will potentially significantly disrupt the peaceful and quiet harmony of the neighborhood. Okay, that's the opening paragraph, it's in essence, which is taking into consideration what everyone has already said. And their first recommendation is to develop a comprehensive plan. You submitted this revised amendment on August 29th, stating that you took everyone's concerns into consideration. It does not at all include what the planning board of Chestnut Ridge has recommended, which is a comprehensive plan. If you take that into consideration, there's no need for us to come back month to month without having all the information. Okay, one major piece of information that's important for us to have is the environmental assessment. We have no idea what that assessment is, but we have no idea what the response to that assessment is going to be. So what's the point of us meeting month to month when the majority of the information that we need to determine whether or not this zoning law makes sense is not available yet? And in the end, we've got a lot of why questions, okay? We know that it doesn't take 4 years to do a comprehensive plan. You said you asked your planning consultant how long would it take, and he said 2 years. Several people said, so why not take the 2 years? If you have your planning board of this village recommending a comprehensive plan, and it's going to take us 2 years, well, that's half the time that you said it was going to take.